as a mayor, you find yourself in quite a unique position is to push Liverpool forward in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, we need to obviously get over the medical emergency, and then we're looking ahead beyond that, because hopefully at some stage we will find a vaccine, or if it's not immunity, we'll find another way of which we can return to some sort of normality. And we're planning for that day. We want to hit the ground running so that we can really start to kickstart the economy and do what we were doing beforehand, which was growing exponentially. We were the fastest growing city region in the whole country. We want to hopefully return to that.
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, what factors were changing Liverpool before? I mean, people my age, the Liverpool's gone through so many different phases over the years, but in the last 5 years, it's positive. It was very positive till this came along, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, John, you probably know from an outsider's perspective better than I do, living here, just how many sort of incarnations the city and the city region, because I represent the city region, sort of wider area, not just Liverpool. But, I've worked away and heard people talking about the place I love in disparaging ways that I didn't recognise their misperceptions of what we were about. And I think that has changed. And I have to say, some of that was down to the way we were treated in 1989 after Hillsborough, and those myths that were built up that it was Liverpool fans and all that. Then when the truth did come out through the Hillsborough Independent Panel, and then, of course, the inquests, maybe people have reverted back to, so what they were doing wasn't moaning, it was about solidarity, and it was about campaigning, and it was trying to seek truth and justice, and maybe they'd give us a fair crack of the whip again.
I mean, I was reading some of your interviews, and you were saying the primary assets of the city, and there is a lot of primary assets, is actually the people themselves. Yeah, the inventiveness and the hardiness of the people. And in a period like this is very important.
Yeah, we're going to have to draw on those reserves of resilience ever more, aren't we, as we hopefully get through the next stages. And who knows, look, we could be heading for either local lockdowns or perhaps even a national lockdown again, as the potential of a second wave becomes ever more real. But we just need to do our bit. We can't rely on a national government that has never done Liverpool or the city region any favours. So we have to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and that's what we stand ready, willing and able to do. And you're right, the people are our greatest asset, and it is those people that we're going to be relying on, because we enter into sort of the fourth industrial revolution, and it's going to be chances with climate emergency for us really to capitalise on the green industrial revolution. And we're really in prime position throughout the whole country to take advantage of some of those things, being a port city, western facing port. Who knows, when the post-Brexit world, potential for bilateral trade deals with America. There are so many factors we don't know, but we're planning for them, and we've got contingencies for all scenarios.
I mean, a lot of these plans, I guess, you were going to put in place anyway before the virus hit. And the virus, because it's completely changed everything, this is the opportunity to make the changes that had to be made, isn't it?
Well, as long as they're for the right reason. Don't forget, some people are using COVID for nefarious reasons. So there are unscrupulous employers who are going, yippee, we wanted to do some nasty stuff. We can now blame it. Remember that old saying that it's a good day to bury bad news. I think this is a good crisis to bury lots and lots of bad news, and we can't allow people to do that. But what, on the positive side, we want to do is to look at where there were opportunities that we've identified to see if we can bring them forward. And so we were looking potentially at sort of a medium term for lots of these things. And I think we can now bring them from medium into the short term.
So when you talk about a fourth industrial revolution, is that like a green tech revolution, or is it to have other facets to it as well?
Yeah, well, innovation is hugely important. So, for instance, we're one of the areas where many years ago we were claiming Castell and Kellner looked at, plastic. So they were one of the people who were involved in discovering plastic, and look at the huge global detrimental consequences of something like that. And we couldn't foresee that at the time. I want to be at the forefront of finding alternatives to plastic. So over on the Wirral Import Sunlight, we're looking at a packaging innovation technology campus. Import Sunlight, so they make all of the sort of the fairy liquids and all that sort of stuff, but it's the packaging that we really want to concentrate on, and we can save the planet, because as we know, that packaging finds its way into the oceans and becomes microplastics, and it affects the ecosystem and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we're trying to do. We're looking ahead and trying to bring those things forward.
So in a sense, I mean, Liverpool as a city, it's 800 years old, whatever. It's got a great history, but it's time not to wallow in the history. This is a point in time when we can actually go forward, and all those things that people always wish they could do, thought, shouldn't we really be doing it like this? This is the opportunity now.
It's got a fantastic history. It's also got a shameful history in parts as well, and we should never ever forget about Black Lives Matters and the fact that we had a part to play in slavery, even though it was the slave triangle. But our part, and we've apologised for that. We've got the International Slavery Museum and stuff like that that actually commemorates those people who, through our shameful past, obviously had terrible lives. But on the positive side of what we can do, I think geographically, when we joined the EU, we were on the wrong side of the country, and now potentially we could be on the right side again. And as part of what will need to happen for UK PLC, I think we can become Britain's energy coast, renewable energy coast, for instance, because that's where we can get tidal from. We've got hydrogen already, but we want green hydrogen. We're doing stuff around solar. We've got Europe's largest offshore wind cluster. So we've got all of these things, but we're using the best of those assets to bring it all together. I don't think we are. That's why having a combined authority allows you to do that. And on digital connectivity, talking about a sort of fourth industrial revolution, we've got the country's most sophisticated supercomputer in our area. It's not in Manchester, or it's not in Cambridge or Oxford or even in London. It's on our doorstep. And the 2 fibre optic cables that link the UK with North America, they come ashore at Southport. So at either end, we've got these 2 mega assets, and we're going to connect them up to get digital connectivity that will be not super fast, but ultra fast. We'll have the fastest speeds in the whole country going through each of our 6 districts. So we really are looking at a really proud, fantastic history in huge parts, but also we're looking forward to the future and thinking that there are bits that we've got that really could put us at the forefront once again in the UK.
I mean, as somebody runs key areas of the UK, what have you learned from the virus? How should cities react to these situations in the future?
I think the first thing is that we can do things better locally than you can nationally. So you've got this huge monolith where they had a national procurement process, say for PPE, and was scrambling around everywhere. And we had stuff right on our doorstep that we couldn't access because you had to go through this national procurement. And we could have done things much better, more locally. And that's a lesson for us all, because we need to react to what the sort of vicissitudes of COVID will be locally. And government, with the monolith, as I say, that it can't do that. We can do that working with government and on behalf of government, but we can do that with more autonomy. And that's why devolution is really so important, not just to us now. Other areas in the country are also now looking for devolution. I spoke to Gordon Brown yesterday, and he's recognised that actually what we're doing in the Liverpool City region and what Andy Burnham's doing in Greater Manchester and other areas, we are leading the political agenda at times because we can speak with some authority as directly elected representatives of huge conurbations.
I mean, my little pet theory is that the virus actually held up a mirror to every government and every person on the planet in a sense. And some people didn't really like what they saw. You know, when you see, not from London specifically city, but from the national government, you don't see a very good image coming back. But I think a lot of the cities have shown they don't have the dad's army muddling their way through approach. It's practical, hands-on. I mean, as an example, what we were talking about before the interview, you actually live as somebody who works in a hospital. I mean, this is not what I'm seeing from the government. These people seem remote from the situation, and I think what you talk about there about the cities being able to rap better and devolution is definitely a way forward.
Yeah, and we can build back better, John. I mean, the thing that me and Burnham launched, Build Back Better, and I know it's not our original sort of slogan. I think it was from one of the Japanese earthquake disasters, and they said, we can build back better. But that's what we want with the economy. We believe that locally we can build back better. We don't have to have the bad practices that went beforehand. We don't have to go back to a situation where we don't recognise those essential key and frontline workers who saw us through this period, and we need to pay them the appropriate rates for their jobs. And the best paid surgeon in the whole country, brain surgeon or whatever, now I think understands, not he, but as part of the overall structure, they understand, don't they, that they're as reliant on the cleaner who's on £9.85 an hour as they are on anybody else. So you can be the most highly skilled, but everybody in that chain has to play their part. And why should we have people who are having to go to food banks, who are working alongside these people? So that disparity has to change. And one of the things that I think I'm most proud of in the city region is that when I launched a charity called LCR Cares, literally the week before lockdown was announced, but we did it in one day. We've got 1.6 million pounds, and we've distributed nearly every single penny of it because we don't want anything lying in the bank account. But you should see the voluntary and community sector in our city region, and I know it exists elsewhere, but they're the people who have stepped up to the plate. They're the people who fill those gaps as sort of the state retreated. They're those people who have helped the most vulnerable in our society. That's the Liverpool city region I know, and as I say, not some of those stereotypical images that unfortunately have been portrayed for far too long.
Yeah, I mean, the image you have is the image I've always seen going there for decades and things. Do you think what you talk about there would have been 5 years ago, would have been looked on as kind of crank socialism or something? But it's a humanism which actually makes complete sense. It made complete sense then, but now in a crisis, it's the only way to get through it. And really, all those things that you were saying for years as an MP and several other people in your party are actually practical solutions to a problem that we're in now, aren't they?
They're very much practical solutions, and to tell you the truth, without them, I fear for what might have happened, because you're talking about desperation with some people, not socially isolating, but absolutely socially isolated, with no sort of family connections. And there's only these voluntary groups that have kept them people going. Otherwise, I think we would have seen horrible stories of people who unfortunately had died and had been left for weeks and months. It was the communities that did that. Working with local councils, it has to be said. I think one of the other things that have come out of this is that there's a recognition, isn't there, that councils are not just there for emptying bins. Councils are really important parts of that community. And whereas Thatcher said there's no such thing as society, actually there's very much something called society, and society is really important. And society is about communities and neighbourhoods and social cohesion and people working together. And look, if that's lily-livered socialism, then I'll wear the T-shirt. I'm proud to be a socialist. And to tell you the truth, without that, without those people, and having the government that we've currently got and we've had over the last decade of austerity, we would have been in a really parlous state as a city region. And actually, we're not, despite all the problems that we have. we are going forward, and people do see the bigger picture. And I once we get over COVID and hopefully get back to, because we're talking about rescue at the moment and then recovery, but then growth. And when we get back to that growth phase, just watch us take off, because we've got all the raw ingredients.
Yeah, sometimes, even though it's not the way you want to do it, sometimes it's good to stop, reset, think, move forward, isn't it? It's just weird. I wish it'd been a better reason for the stop, really. But
Yeah.
There's another unique thing here as well. Your very good friends, Andy Burnham, Liverpool and Manchester, 30 miles apart for so long, been like rivals or whatever. But I'm sensing that cities are kind of growing together. And the music scene, there was never a rivalry. It was always close and things. The football creates a rivalry, but a bit of piss taking is always good. But now there's a sense that, and it's a hideous term because it's a Tory term, the Northern Powerhouse is actually done it itself, hasn't it, without any help from down there. Which quietly, it's a quiet revolution that you and Andy was sort of creating the Northern Powerhouse.
Yeah, I said, John, when we were both MPs in Parliament, when we first looked at whether we should stand for the metro mayoralties in those two great areas, because we're mates and he lived in Greater Manchester and has done for most of his life, even though he's an Everton supporter for some strange reason. But even that sort of rivalry between ourselves, and we said, if you get beyond the tribalism, I think rivalry's fine. It was the tribalism that was the problem. And I remember that from a kid, through the football and all that, and used to hate Man United and hate Man City, or Man City weren't really a threat at that time. And all of that nonsense, as you hopefully mature and become a different and better person, you start to realise that quite scarily there's an awful lot that we have in common. Yeah. And if you have a look at the commonality, that football in our DNA, music as part of us, our very being, culturally we're very much the same. So get beyond that sort of veneer of the nastiness, and actually underneath there's an awful lot that I think we should celebrate jointly. And Andy and myself are looking at seeing whether when we do come out of this, there might be a way in which we could do a joint music event, like a massive celebration of what Greater Manchester have offered. Maybe in Spike Island, which is in the middle of it, because it's got connotations of what happened in that summer. And there's lots of things I think we could do that brings us together. And the reason is because if we can get over the Mickey Mouse tribal rivalries, we're about 4.5 million people between us. We're as big as Scotland, we're bigger than Wales, we're bigger than Northern Ireland. We're sort of rivaling London, okay, half the size, but you think about those two, as you said, powerhouses coming together, and a port city for us and an international airport with them, all that complementarity, it starts to make absolute sense, and we really could start punching way above our weight. So that's why we thought, if there's not a Northern Powerhouse, because it was a George Osborne artificial construct, wasn't it? But we can really work on a Northwest Powerhouse, and I think we've started to lay the foundations for that.
Yeah, I mean, for years I've always felt as comfortable in both cities. The only thing that makes it really difficult, and I think this is the big psychological barrier, is the transport, the terrible train that takes forever to get there and breaks down. If it could take 20 minutes to go from one centre to the other, they would seem much closer.
Yeah, and we're looking at 22 minutes with the new link. 22 minutes. Literally, I skit Andy. I say, so that 22 minutes, just imagine what that means to people. It means that you could go from Liverpool if you want and go and work in Manchester and then come back and live in somewhere with culture, which really winds them up. But it is that, and that's good, because that rivalry still exists between us. But there's a germane of some truth in what I'm saying, which is, I think Manchester has become very developed and perhaps overdeveloped in bits, but we are still the cultural capital, no matter what. We're not European capital of culture anymore, but if you have a look at all the relevant bits, they're all here. More museums than anywhere outside of London, and galleries. the most filmed city in the whole country outside of London. We've got more grade 1 and 2 listed buildings than anywhere. You know, you walk around everywhere in Liverpool, and that history that we spoke about before, it's there. It's physical. You can see it. And it's very interconnected. Whereas I think Manchester, there's a bit over there, and there's a bit over there, and there's a bit here, and it's a bit disjointed. You can walk around. You can literally walk around all of our bits in a day or two and soak the whole lot up. So I think there are huge advantages of having better transport links for both of us.
Yeah, because we both have things that the other side needs. And I mean, I guess the thing about Manchester was it was a city. It had to build itself on top of a broken city, didn't it? Whereas you were already, because you were the second city of the empire. It was a very grand centre, wasn't it? Which was allowed to rot, but now you still got that legacy, which is a great thing to have. So do you work very closely with Andy then? Is this like, you know, if you have problems or he has problems, do you sort of have powwows?
Yeah, we don't forget we came together with Hillsborough really because Andy was the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport at a time when Liverpool was European Capital of Culture, and I was the Lord Mayor of Liverpool. And so that's how it happened. So we've known each other, 13, 14 years now. And sometimes you need somebody who understands the sort of things that you're going through. And we've both been parliamentarians. I know Andy was in the government. I wasn't. I was only ever in opposition. But we've both been parliamentarians and seen that system and how it stagnates and stifles and sometimes prevents areas from really achieving their full potential. We saw that at close quarters. And then when we became metro mayors, then a lot of the same problems with trying to get certain government departments to work with you and the frustrations and headaches you have of building something, and you don't want it to become the monolith that you've been critical of all the time, like central government. So you want to see whether you can get things out. And there's so many things that we've got in common other than my love of Liverpool Football Club and his detestation of it.
It's a sad indictment to the system that to be an MP is almost you can't do so much, can you? That you at first when people saw you and Andy going back up north to become metro mayors, it was almost looked like a step backwards. But really, and the reality is, if you're ever going to achieve anything, you have to be a place where you can achieve things, don't you?
Yeah, I got told I was mad, John. I had the number one, the first safest seat in the whole country, Liverpool Walton. I turned it. It was top 5 before I got it, but I turned it into the number one safest seat in the whole country. And I was building myself a reputation of being somebody who campaigned. Forget about Hillsborough just for a second. But we did things on the Shrewsbury pickets. We did things on Tainted Blood. I did things on the Tired campaign, which was the lad who came back from the Festival in the Isle of Wight, and the coach tyre, which is 20 years old, crashed, and his mum, Frances Malloy, asked me to get him. There was loads and loads of things that I did, and I was really starting to make headway and understand the parliamentary system. And then obviously doing this, but that stands me in good stead because I do understand the parliamentary system, whereas I think if I had to come in just a fresh face into this and then wondered why the wheels turned so slowly, it might have stopped me from doing some of the things. Tell you the truth, we're getting on and doing it. So in lots of ways, in my devolution deal especially, it doesn't tell me that I can do these things that I'm doing, but nowhere does it say you can't do them. So until the government tells me to stop doing them, we're doing them anyway, and we're really extending the soft powers and the convening powers of the metro mayors to try and get things done in a much more coordinated and a collaborative way in our city regions.
Yeah, I mean, I see Liverpool and Manchester as examples to the Tory media, the Tory press, whatever. When they always say, if Labour got in, the whole country would fall apart. You go, well, look at Liverpool and Manchester; they're both booming. I mean, not only are they booming as communities and we talked about socialism before. Socialism in action actually works. They're actually booming in wealth as well, which is a conundrum for the right wing sort of critics in it. And do you see that as sometimes back of your mind? See what you and Andy are doing up here as examples of socialism in action, how it can actually work for the better.
Absolutely, John. I spoke to Jeremy and I said, look, Jeremy, we're providing you with a platform of showing Labour in power and socialism in action. And for me, that's your counter to what the right-wing press is saying, oh, if these loons get in charge, the whole thing's going to fall apart and all. And actually what we've done, we've built massive alliances. So I've got huge support with the business community, but we are doing things differently. So we've said to the business community, if you want some of the funding that we get, then you have to do things differently. And they've responded well to that, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I mean, do you see, I talk about this other people involved in business, but they see post-COVID now, people talk about business as a tool for change. And not talk about the Philip Greens, and talk about the proper Greens. The people who see, like someone like Dale Vince at Ecotricity, the wind power guy, they see going on in some business, obviously not all of it, because some people still think it's just a way to accrue massive wealth. But some people are seeing it, if you build up a very big business, you can actually use it as a tool of positive change. And these are the kind of people you're dealing with, or you're trying to push them gently into that direction as well.
Yeah, we've got an event that's happening. It was going to be a live event, but unfortunately, until we can get over this next phase, next year we'll have something. And this year, with Wayne Hemingway and others, it's called the Good Business Festival. And it's about profit for purpose. So we're not against profit. We're just against profit being squandered and put into the pockets of shareholders who bugger off, or we are against offshoring, or we're against, this sort of squandering of billions of pounds on stuff that never materialises, PPE. So we're against all that. But actually what you can do with good ethical businesses who treat their workers right is that you can promote that and change the culture of business in an area. Now, nationally, Tory governments are never ever going to do this, but we're the first in the country to look at this. It's around community wealth building, for instance, genuine, proper economic inclusion, so social inclusion, but economic inclusion as well. That thing I said to you about wanting to be the most digitally connected, that's great. But if you can't actually afford the charges for your Wi-Fi to join Virgin or BT or whatever it is, then all of that's pie in the sky. So it's about that inclusion as well, digital inclusion instead of exclusion. So we're looking at everything, but we believe that good businesses and ethical businesses, this is the time now when the world is prepared to look and pay perhaps a slight premium on things, rather, ethically resourced, instead of what's happened in the past, people going for the cheapest stuff at Matalan or whatever that might have been made in sweatshops. I'm not just calling out Matalan, there's loads of others, but that sort of stuff where he went for the cheap clobber and didn't think about where it was sourced from. We're talking about now, making certain that these things are sourced properly, but also that the workers are looked after, whether they're in this country or anywhere else. One of the things that Jeremy Corbyn said to me when we were doing some campaign together, he was talking about clothes, and he said, because I always wear white shirts for work, really white shirts, nice clothes, because I like clothes. And he said, but as long as you find out where that's made in, because what they might be doing, because I checked in this country, he said, but what they might do is export the bad bit of it. So it might be bleached in a third world country, and that bleach obviously causes problems to the environment there. And then they can say, once it's imported here, it was all of that part of the supply chain was ethical. And he's spot on, isn't he? We've got to look at these things in the round and not just a small part of it that ends up in our shop locally.
it's a very complex unpicking of centuries of cheating. So I mean, no expects anybody to pull it off overnight, but again, I think if you're running a city or a city region, it's easy to keep an eye and make sure these things have been done correctly or morally, isn't it?
It is, John. Yeah, it is.
We talked about Black Lives Matter before, and of course, Liverpool has that problems with its history. So what? And you've got the museum now, but what about the other things that people talk about? You know, renaming the streets, or you know, what's your take on all that? What's the best way going forward from here?
That was a bit of a storm in a teacup, in all honesty. The name of the streets. I think people are much more concerned about the institutionalised and the structural racism that goes on still within society, rather than arguing over the nuances of whether, for instance, Penny Lane was one of the arguments, wasn't it? Whether James Penny, who was a slave trader or supported slave trade, whether it was his name, and you know, even the Slavery Museum was sort of embroiled in all that. And actually, when you get over it, over that hurdle, still needed to be tackled, and quite rightly so. But once we got over that hurdle, then you start to really address the fundamentals. And for me, have a look at how many people in the sort of top echelons of Liverpool City region life are black or minority ethnic. Have a look at our political makeup. Liverpool's not bad actually, but have a look in some of the other areas. Have a look at why the likes of Tommy Robinson went into Highton, where, you know, Anthony Walker was killed by racists, and he went in to try, you know, very predominantly, when I say predominantly, it's overwhelmingly white working class. And why did they choose the likes of Highton and Bootle to do those sorts of things? So I think there are lots and lots of things that we need to do to encourage the business community, the wider society within Liverpool, to open up these opportunities, because that's what for me it's all about. It's about equality of opportunity, and we need to be doing that in so many fields so that we can get those black role models to encourage people to smash those glass ceilings. That's what I really want to do in the future.
Again, and probably to sum up, it's more about the future. I mean, you deal with the past, but this is all about going forwards and making the changes. When you can't really change the past, but you can change the future.
Yeah, recognise the past, but change the future.
Great, that's a good point to stop. Thanks for your time, Steve. Yeah.
Buddy, lovely to speak to you again. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you on the other side, yeah.